Hello and welcome to Best of TechEd 2012, New Features in Windows Server 2012, presented by Ed Liberman. I'm Joanna from TrainSignal, and I'd like to take a minute to tell you what to expect in the next hour. First, I'd like to draw your attention to the questions box in the webinar control panel. Ed will be answering questions today, so feel free to submit your questions during the presentation. Also, if you have any technical difficulties, let us know in the questions box, and we'll do our best to assist you. Today's presentation will be recorded and available to view on our blog. We'll email you the link after the presentation. After you exit the webinar, you will be prompted to take a short survey. TrainSignal wants to hear from you, so please take a few minutes to complete the survey. We'll also be choosing one participant from today's audience to receive a copy of Introducing Windows Server 2012. To be eligible to win, you must complete the follow-up survey. If you have additional comments or feedbacks, you can email us at webinars@trainsignal.com. And with that, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Here's Ed.
Thank you, Joanna, and welcome everybody who's here with us today. So, what are we doing here with this webinar today? Well, as hopefully most of you and really hopefully all of you are aware, TechEd North America took place in Orlando, Florida 2 weeks ago. And actually TechEd Europe is taking place right now, or I guess technically, and you know, some of you who are in Europe probably can correct me on this because I'm not perfect with the time changes, but I believe TechEd Europe probably just wrapped up a matter of just a few hours ago. And I was at TechEd North America out in Orlando. I was actually there as an MCT ambassador, and which I'll explain that in a moment. But anyway, the idea here is, you know, not everybody gets the opportunity to go out to this conference that Microsoft puts on every year. And so what I like to do in some capacity or another, I like to come back and share some of my experience, share what I took from the conference. And that's where the idea behind this webinar came from. Is I said, you know what, you know, I'm going to be out of TechEd. I know a lot of people can't go, and they're going to want to hear about it. And I figured that with the release, or with the upcoming release of Windows Server 2012, and with the huge number of sessions that were taking place on that particular product, that I would be able to come back and share with you some of the stuff that I thought was pretty cool with that product. So that's what we're going to do here today. And you'll see in just a moment here, there's one other component that I want to share with you if you're interested. But you know, we'll get to that in just a second. So let's move along. Real quick, for those of you who don't know who I am, and my screen is giving me some technical difficulty there. There we go. For those of you who don't know who I am, those of you who maybe have not ever seen any of my courses or attended any of my webinars, my name is Ed Liberman, and just kind of real quick, I'm a guy who, you know, since a very young age has played with computers and has worked in technology. We were actually just laughing earlier today over the fact that there's an Apple IIe, for any of you who go way back, that's sitting here in my office, and somebody took a picture of it, posted it on Facebook, and we've had all kinds of comments going back and forth, and I realized how old I am, that was one of the original computers. It was actually the first computer I officially owned. But anyway, so I've been working in technology for a long time. More specifically, I've been certified and instructing IT for 13 years, and actually, I think I'm in about a month. I believe I hit my 14-year anniversary, so I get to change this slide pretty soon. You see, I have a lot of alphabet soup behind my name, meaning certification is a big deal to me. I've gone out and taken a lot of tests. I mentioned that I was an MCT ambassador at TechEd 2012. What that means is that I was invited by Microsoft to attend TechEd in the form of staff, meaning I was there, and if any of you were there, you would have seen me as one of the people walking around in one of the green polos that says TechEd North America on it. And I was there in a capacity where I had the job of answering questions from all of the other 11,000 attendees, specifically with regards to Microsoft Learning as far as the training and certification. So that was a huge role that I played at TechEd 2012 this year. That's redundant, I think, right? TechEd 2012 this year. But anyway, my full-time position is here at TrainSignal. I am the lead Windows Server Instructor, so anything that is involving Windows Server products, well, I have some piece of that action. I touch it in some way. All right, so that's who I am. Now, real quick, what I want to do is I want to throw a couple of polls at you. And those of you who have been to webinars with me before, you know that this is pretty much how I always do it. I'm going to start off. Now, you can't click on this. This is just a PowerPoint slide you're looking at right now. I'm going to go ahead and put this up as an official poll. Let me launch that. And I believe now it should be active to where you can answer what continent you are from. I apologize to those of you from South America, Africa, and Antarctica. I don't mean to group you all together. I don't think of you as all one part of the world, but I only have 5 selections that I can put in here, so I had to put it all together. So go ahead and tell me where you're from. I like to see where around the world everyone is here from, especially in this session, being that it was TechEd North America that I attended. So I want to see how many of you are also here with me in North America versus how many are over in other continents. And it looks like, well, almost 80% of you have voted. So the other 20% of you, wake up, go click a button. It's not a whole lot of work that I'm asking out of you. Just tell me where you're from. Not a big deal. So I'm going to give you just another 5 seconds or so. So you got to hurry up, click your button if you want to vote. All right, and we're going to go ahead and close the polling here. And then let's take a look at these results. I know it's a little awkward. The screen flashes back and forth. There we go. You guys should be able to see the results now, and it looks like 71% of you are here with me in North America. So I'm going to be very interested in the next poll question that I'll have for you because it relates to those of you who are here in North America. It looks like 16% from Europe and 12% from Asia and 1% from either South America, Africa, or Antarctica. And being that we have just under 100 people here right now, that means, if I'm doing my math right, it means exactly one of you is from one of those other continents. So welcome, glad to have you there, or have you here anyway. Let me go ahead and jump to my second poll, and it has to do with, sorry that I'm kind of talking while I'm trying to click around here. Did you or have you ever attended TechEd at all? And I mentioned that, I want to know from the North America people because, I'm curious if you were there with me, but I want to know from everyone worldwide. TechEd is not just here in North America. So I want to know if you attended this year's TechEd. Now, you can only answer one choice, so if you went to this year, pick that top choice. Or maybe you didn't make it this year, but you've gone to TechEd in the past, or maybe you've never been at all. Now, I have my own personal speculation as to how these results are going to be, but I want to see what it actually is. Again, it looks like about 75% of you have voted, so apparently a few less of you are as interested in this poll as the previous one. So I'm going to give you just another 5 or 10 seconds here to go ahead and tell me, because I'm actually pretty much getting confirmation on what I thought was going to be the results. So let me go ahead and I'm going to close this poll. And show you the results. All right, this is what I kind of figured. If you're going to come to a webinar hearing all about, letting me come and tell you about what goes on at TechEd, well, then odds are you probably didn't go. And sure enough, 92% of you said that you've never attended TechEd. And let me just kind of speak real quick to the 92% of you. You should try to go. I mean, I get that it's expensive. I get that not everyone has the time or the means to get out there. But if you can, it is something that is very worth your while. I have gone to the last 3 consecutive TechEds. I had actually gone to some in previous years before them, but most recently I've gone to 3 in a row. And even the worst of the 3, which I will not share with you which one the worst is, it was not this year. The one that I felt was the worst, or I got the least out of, it was still very worth going. I didn't have any regrets whatsoever. You are always going to pull information that is well worth the time that you're going to invest and the money that you're going to invest to go there. So I strongly encourage that. 3% of you said you went to TechEd 2012, and I hope that was 3 of you maybe from TechEd North America, and if you were there and you saw me, I would love it if you throw that into the question box and you know, be like, hey, you know, I saw you there, or hey, I was there, where were you? Something like that. And then 5% of you went in previous years. So that's wonderful. Now, I have one more question for you. I don't want to bore you with these questions, but I do have one more question for you. It's very important. Before you answer, let me explain the question. The question is, do you want to hear about the new MCSE and MCSD certifications? I want to know in this poll if you want to hear about it today in this webinar. Okay, in other words, now that you're here and we promoted this webinar as Features in Windows Server 2012, I want to tell you that one of the huge things that I pulled out that's related to Windows Server 2012 is some new certifications that were only made public as of TechEd. Okay, they were, I mean, they may have leaked out previously, but they really became public 2 weeks ago. And if you want to hear about it in this webinar as a part of what we're doing, then I'm going to do it. If you don't, well, then I'm going to respect that. That's not what you came here for, and I'm not going to. And so let me just give you another. Now you can go ahead and answer. I see some of you have already. I want to give you a few more seconds to tell me, do you want to hear about it? Because I personally think it's very cool information. It was what I spent the majority of my time doing, was answering endless questions about certification, because, you know, of the 11,000 people there, I think 10,000 of them probably had questions and came up and asked me. So if that holds true here in this webinar, well, I want to answer those questions for you as well. All right, I'm going to close the poll on this, and I don't even need to show you the results. What I can tell you is 3/4 of you said yes, you want to hear about it. So I am going to spend some time with it. What I'm going to do is I think I'm going to maybe stop for a little Q&A before I get to certification talk. And that way, for the 25% of you, if you're like, heck no, I don't even want to hear about it, I don't care about certification, you know, then you don't need to be bored with it. All right, so let me go ahead and get rid of these polls. So let me move these slide decks along, and let's talk about what we're going to do in this session. So let's see, what do we have here? What happens at TechEd stays at TechEd. No, not at all. The polar opposite. Okay, obviously that saying comes from what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Yeah, no. What happens at TechEd? We don't want to be kept at TechEd. This is not meant to be. TechEd was not meant by Microsoft to be this this private exclusive club, you know, and only the 11,000 attendees get to hear stuff and they can't go anywhere else. No, the sessions that we go to are made available. Matter of fact, I'm going to give you a link where I show you where all of the sessions that were at TechEd, you all have access to them if you want to watch the recordings of them or download the PowerPoint slides from them. I am going to go through some new features of Windows Server 2012. That's what was promised, right? And I will tell you, to be more specific, there's one session in particular that was my absolute favorite. It is such a favorite of mine. I actually I saw it twice, and it's partly because it's related to Active Directory, which is another passion of mine. So I'm going to go through a few of those features. Now I have to tell you, there's not time to give you like full demonstration of these features, so this is going to be from a concept perspective, but I will tell you it's very worthwhile. It is very cool stuff if you've never heard about it before. And then, like I mentioned, because you guys did ask for it, I will wrap things up by reviewing the new certifications that were announced. And for any of you that are wondering, if you're thinking, well, wait a minute, they announced the new MCSE or the reinvented MCSE long before TechEd. I mean, it was back in April. Yes, but for those of you that were confused about the fact that MCSE was all about private cloud certification, and for any of you, and I'm guessing there's at least some of you who, you know, since you're interested in Windows Server 2012, you're thinking, well, yeah, I'm not necessarily into that private cloud and system center thing. I want to know about MCSE on Windows Server 2012. I'm going to tell you there is one. Okay, it's actually officially there's not an MCSE on Windows Server 2012, but there is a server infrastructure MCSE that is completely related to what you do if you're a server administrator. All right, so let's go into this. As far as, you know, the whole what happens in TechEd stays there, no, not at all. Okay, nothing stays at TechEd. I will tell you that there were, I don't even know how many hundreds of sessions. I did not look what the exact total was. What I can tell you is if you're interested in learning about Windows Server 2012, there were 69 sessions that were directly associated with that product. That's a huge number. That's a number that is so huge that it was not possible for me or anybody else for that matter to attend every one of them. There's, they're happening at the same time. They overlap. There's not enough hours in the day to attend 69 of these sessions. The good news is that they are available. The recordings of them, anyway, are available to watch on demand on TechEd's website. And I'm going to give you a link to that site, by the way. What else did we have when trying to learn about Windows Server 2012? When at TechEd, we had hands-on labs, and I heard they were pretty cool. I'll be honest with you and tell you I didn't have time for them. I wanted to. I really wanted to. And I just, between my duties as an MCT ambassador, tried to answer everybody's questions. And I will tell you, my duties, it required me to devote 16 hours of the TechEd time window to answering these questions. And there were so many people coming by, I probably put in double that. It's just I can't walk away from the booth if there's a line of people waiting to answer, ask questions. So between that and then the sessions that I wanted to attend, I didn't get over to the hands-on labs, but the feedback I got from people was phenomenal. They were loving being able to walk through and learn about Windows Server 2012, and of course Windows 8 as well. One thing that I thought was very cool was and this is the section where I was working, was they had a whole exam and certification-based section where they had cram sessions where you had MCTs who repeatedly, they're just ongoing throughout the day, every day of TechEd, was having these hour-long sessions talking about the specific individual technologies that you might be testing on. They also had the ability to take practice tests and some e-learning. I didn't even put a bullet point for that here, but they did have some free exams, including beta exams on Windows Server 2012. Okay, and that's actually why I didn't put a beta, or a bullet point, I should say, for the practice tests, because there are no practice tests for Windows Server 2012, but there were beta exams. All right, so that was, kind of the opportunity that was there at TechEd 2012. Now, if you want to join in, like I've been saying again and again and again, is you can go ahead and watch these sessions on demand. Okay, so when you're done with this webinar, you know what? This is not a live link that you can click on, but if you want to jot it down, if you go to this, you put this in your browser, and hopefully you don't leave the webinar to go do it right now. Hopefully you'll at least wait till I'm done. If you can give me the rest of this hour. But I will tell you that if you go there, and I expect that you will, even if you weren't already registered for TechEd, even if you did not attend TechEd, all you have to do is put in your information and register. And I'll tell you what, let me take you there now real fast. I'm going to click on the link because it is a live link on my computer. And it does take me into a TechEd website where you can just simply put in your first and last name, your email address, and you make up a password and click sign up. Now, if you already are familiar with this website and you already know how to access some of this stuff, right up here you can just click sign into my TechEd. Once you are signed in, and I believe I am, you can go over to content and then catalog, and you can search the catalog just based upon any word you want, whether it's the name of a speaker or the name of a subject or whatever. There are different tracks, speakers, products, technologies, etc. And once you find something that you like, okay, so let's go to a product or technology, and if I scroll way down here, here's our Windows Server 2012. There's our 69 sessions. Let me check that box. If we were to just pick one of these sessions, so let's just say Windows 2012 Overview. Oh, you know what? I'm not signed in. I'm not signed in because it says read more. So let me sign in real fast. I'll use my Windows Live ID, which is something that you have the option of doing, but you don't have to do. Okay, so let me go ahead and sign in real quick, just so because I want you to be able to see how to do this. I think this is really important. Of Kerberos is going really slow. So if you're wondering why the screen's like, if it's not refreshing real fast, it actually is. It's the website that's not refreshing real fast. There we go. So now, let's see here. Content, actually directory. I'm hoping this is going to go faster, otherwise I'm going to ditch this and we'll come back to it later. Here we go. Content, catalog, product technology. Scroll down here. Windows Server 2012. Now you'll notice here I have the Windows Server 2012 overview. Here I can download or open up the PowerPoints, or I can click on this little play button here and it says watch video online. All right, so I really encourage you to do this because I can only share so much with you in a very short period of time here, in 1 hour. Okay, so let me go ahead and let's get out of here and let's go back to our slide deck. I will tell you that some of the issue with trying to bring back stuff from TechEd this year is that there was just way too much. You know, I mentioned there's only so much I can share in an hour, and if you can't tell, I'm really excited. I mean, that's why I'm telling you, go watch these sessions. Here are all the new things that Microsoft was pushing this year. Okay, whereas last year, you know, what did I bring back? I brought back a whole lot of stuff about Windows Server 2008, which had already been out for 3-4 years. So it was just a matter of saying, well, here's a couple of new features. How cool is that? Well, this year, it's all about, hey, there's a new operating system, Windows Server 2012, as well as Windows 8. We got System Center 2012, the new Hyper-V, Azure, and then, of course, the reinvented certification program. These were the things that Microsoft was collectively across the board highlighting throughout 1 week of conference. And I'll tell you, I cannot remember the last TechEd that I attended that had this much stuff going on all at the same time. Usually things are staggered a little bit more. So we had a little bit of a lull last year, a little bit even the last 2 years, whereas now, bam, everything all at once. So a lot of exciting stuff. You go through all the sessions, you're going to learn more than you could ever imagine. Now, here were a few of my favorites. And you'll notice that any of you who know me, either you've seen my courses or you know what I get excited about, you know that I primarily get involved with basic network infrastructure, Active Directory, remote desktop services, and stuff like that. And so you'll see that, what do I have here? What's new in Active Directory? What's new with Hyper-V? With dynamic access control? And I'll tell you what, I put the one that says overview. The reality is there's a whole list of dynamic access control sessions. As a matter of fact, ones that I still have yet to see that I want to go see. I'm trying to find time to watch them. You know, every single time I'm watching one of these, I'm learning some new feature. Remote FX and RDP, rocking RDS, which is Remote Desktop Services in Windows Server 2012. The next one, if I would have spelled the whole thing out, it'd be about 3 lines long. So it was Windows Server 2012 Dynamic Access Control Deep Dive for Active Directory and let's see here, Central Authorization Policies, I believe is if I have the right words for CAP. So that was a very, very cool one. That was basically the opposite extreme of Dynamic Access Control Overview. Now it was a deep dive into one aspect of it, which I thought was very cool. Active Directory Virtualization Safeguards and DC Cloning, which is just, again, a deeper dive into something that came out of the What's New in Active Directory session up at the top. Windows Server 2012 IP Address Management, and the 2012 File System Enhancements. These were some of the sessions that I keyed in on to make sure that I got to at least a piece of it if I couldn't be there for the whole session, and or watched on demand after the fact. Now, all that said, you know, that's all fine and dandy, right? There's a list of maybe some of the sessions that I recommend because I get excited about them. What I'm going to do here for you in the next short period of time is I'm going to review my favorite session, which is the What's New in Active Directory in Windows Server 2012. Okay, the very top one on that list there. This was a session that I saw a version of it actually at another conference a month earlier, and have watched it again, presented by actually the same presenter. His name is Dean Wells. I think he is one of my favorite presenters from the Microsoft staff. He's actually on the Active Directory team, and he really knows his stuff. He participated in the actual development of this stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to summarize some of the key points, and then again encourage you to go watch the whole thing. He's quite entertaining. If depending on how new you are to the industry, if you can handle 300 and 400 level type stuff, he gets to that level at times in the session. The session is not designed to be that intense, but he does get to that level at times. The three main points that I want to pull out is that what do we focus on in Active Directory 2012? Okay, Active Directory has been around since Windows 2000, and every new version with Windows Server 2003, with Windows Server 2003 R2, with Windows Server 2008, and then Windows Server 2008 R2, we make new advancements in Active Directory. And a lot of people thought that Microsoft, there wasn't a whole lot that they were going to be able to do. They thought Windows Server 2012 would come out and Active Directory was just going to be the same thing. It is what it is, right? They created it, they took feedback, and they made stuff better over the years. Now what are they going to do? Well, believe it or not, they did a ton, and it is awesome. They have simplified deployment of Active Directory, okay, because that is one of the major thorns in any enterprise administrator's side. Because we are in the day and age of cloud computing and virtualization everywhere, we now have Active Directory virtualization. That actually works, because I don't know if any of you here with me have tried virtualizing your domain controllers, but if you have, and you're not using some kind of third-party utility to help you with the process, you know that there are a number of pitfalls that come with it. We'll talk about a few of those. And then we also have Simplified Management. And I will tell you, with regards to the Simplified Management, we're not talking just Active Directory. We're talking about Windows Server 2012 across the board, the new server manager and everything. It's all about Simplified Management. So let's dig a little deeper into some of this. First of all, we have Simplified Deployment. All right, so we want to make installing Active Directory better. And there's a number of things they did, and I will tell you that this is where the presenter spent a lot of time. Of the 80 minutes or so that this session took, he spent a whole lot of time talking about the very beginning of Simplified Deployment, because he made it very clear that the number one complaint that was coming through basically had to do with if you were trying to, install a newer version of Active Directory into an existing AD environment. Okay, so you have your existing Windows Server 2008 environment, and you now want to install Windows Server 2012 Active Directory, and you had to go through this whole AD prep process. Okay, where you have to do AD prep, and you have to do forest prep, you have to do domain prep, and you had to be aware of what domain controller, the one that had, in the case of forest prep, the schema master role, or in the case of the domain prep, the infrastructure master role. You had to know that you had to do it on that server, and you had to go physically to that server. You couldn't do it remotely. So what they did was they said, well, that's dumb. Let's fix it. And it's funny because as I'm saying that, I can almost hear like I'm trying to say it like the guy who presented it, because he presents it very well, and I'm not him. So, but I will tell you that that's kind of the approach they took. That's dumb, so let's just fix it. And they did. They integrated the whole preparation and promotion process. They made it that now you don't have to specifically do the AD prep anymore. You go to install the new domain controller, and it automatically looks and says, oh, look at that. I need to upgrade the schema and make it that we now have the features and functionality for Windows Server 2012 Active Directory. And I don't care what domain controller you're on, I will automatically go out remotely and do these updates on the appropriate server. Very, very cool. It also automated the process of making sure that you meet the prerequisites. I did a webinar about 3 weeks ago, and I quickly showed Active Directory installation, and I showed how during that process, it actually will make sure that you are in an environment that it can accept the domain controller. So they've included that as well. We also reduced the odds of deployment failure by validating those prerequisites, not only before deployment, which is kind of the same thing as what I just said about automating prerequisites, but during deployment. And again, when I demonstrated that a few weeks ago, we saw that where as we go through the process, it like checks and then double checks those prerequisites before each stage of the Active Directory installation. They minimize the number of touch points by giving full remote capabilities. As I mentioned, doesn't matter what server you're on. It doesn't matter where you're doing it from. Technically, you don't even have to be on a server. You could be on a Windows 8 client with the Windows Server 2012, RSAT, remote server administration tools, using the new server manager. So full remote capabilities. They optimize it for common deployment paths. So rather than this is kind of it's funny because this is like trivial, but yet you think about it, it's like, wow, this actually makes sense. In the old days, before Windows Server 2012, when you go to install Active Directory, it assumes, meaning the default settings are an assumption of, I'm installing a brand new forest. Well, how often do you do that? You do it once. I mean, yeah, in a large enough enterprise, you might have multiple forests, but in that forest, you do it once. And then every other domain controller after that is not installing a new forest. So why make that the default? They realize that 90+% of the time you're creating an additional domain controller in existing domain. So why not make that the default? Okay, so again, small but important. They also made Active Directory consistent with other Windows Server roles, so they went ahead and made it that things are very similar. The way you install Active Directory is the same way you install other roles. It's all done through the Server Manager. Very simple. And now this is something that is true across the board in Windows Server 2012, not just through Active Directory, but that you have an improved user interface. And not just an improved interface, but interface consistency by using PowerShell. Meaning because everything is built on PowerShell, everything is very consistent. Now, a few additional side notes when it comes to simplified deployment. They realized, and this is, I'll tell you what, for any of you here who have worked with Active Directory in a previous version, as I have, I've actually worked with Active Directory through every version going back to Windows 2000. One thing that always, just to be very frank, pissed me off is that if anything happened during the installation process, you just got a failure. Meaning you could have some small hiccup in your network when a new domain controller was trying to communicate. Maybe you were installing a replica domain controller and it was trying to talk to the original, it was trying to copy over the database, and there was a hiccup on the network, and it just said, sorry, I failed. Go back to the beginning and start over. How ridiculous is that, right? So they fixed it. They fixed it to where now it'll retry. Meaning if you're in the middle of, let's say, replicating over the database into a new domain controller and there's a hiccup, it says, well, that's all right, I had a hiccup. Try again. Let's continue where we left off. And they tried to figure out, is there a certain point where we should give up, right? Is there a certain point, after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 10 hours, 1 day, 1 week? Is there some point in time that we say, you know what, I've been trying and the network's just not coming back up, so let's just, at this point, just die and say failure? And they determined no. They said, you know what, let's leave that up to you, the administrator, because everybody's environment is different. If you're trying to replicate over an inconsistent WAN link, you want it just to keep retrying until it finally succeeds. You don't want to have some built-in, point that says, oh, I've been down too long, I'm just going to give up and say, I'm toast, you're going to have to go back to square one. You keep going until you decide, oh, I'm going to go ahead and hit the cancel button because something's not working. Installing from media. This is something that was actually an amazing introduction into Active Directory to speed up the process of installing additional domain controllers. It was the idea of being able to basically take your Active Directory database, put it on media, transmit that media either over the wire, or heck, you could even physically burn it onto a CD, DVD, or put it onto a USB drive, whatever you had to do. Overnight it over to another office, whatever it took, and then install based upon that media. In other words, install another domain controller. The problem is that it used to be mandatory that you had to do an offline defrag, which very often would take hours and was completely unnecessary. If you have a healthy Active Directory database, you do not need to perform an offline defrag. So why are we doing it every single time we install from media? Especially when installing from media was supposed to speed up the process. Instead, it was slowing down the process. Guess what that resulted in? Nobody using, well, I don't want to say nobody, because that's not true at all. There's actually a lot of people who still use install from media, but much fewer, or I could say many fewer people than otherwise would have. So they've now made it an option to remove that process. It'll still do it by default, but you can choose to say, nope, I don't want to do that. That's a waste of time. And one last little note, I'm not going to go into any great detail here, is that Active Directory Federation Services, ADFS, is now an in-the-box server role, whereas it used to be an add-on download. And it's integrated with this really cool thing you've heard me talk about, which is dynamic access control. All right, so that is, that's, I would spend every minute that we have left in this webinar, and then another many hours beyond that if I try to go into the details of dynamic access control. But the fact that they not only have this feature in Windows Server 2012, but that Federation Services is also integrated with it, is just amazing. All right, now let's talk about Active Directory virtualization. As I mentioned, it has problems. It's in the past it has had problems. And a lot of those problems had a lot to do with if you took snapshots, which is where you take a snapshot of a point in time of a domain controller, and it's not so much taking the snapshot, it's rolling it back to that snapshot. Causes all kinds of weird problems. And what it did was it created something called a USN bubble. Now, this is a place where I'm kind of on the border of going into maybe a deeper level than some of you may be ready to take on. But the idea is if you take a domain controller and you put it back to a previous point in time, the way the current replication topologies are set up, you have problems. You get lingering objects, inconsistent passwords, and inconsistent attribute values, meaning the reason you get those things, and I'll add to that list, duplicate SIDs. All these things happen because of the way the replication topology is currently set up. Now, with Windows Server 2012, and I will tell you, it goes beyond just Windows Server and Active Directory 2012, you also must have a hypervisor, so some virtualization product that supports something called VM Generation ID. If you have those things, the Active Directory database now has the ability to detect when you've restored to a snapshot. And what it does is when that happens, you change your VM Generation ID. Okay, it's a whole separate type of identifier than the other identifiers we already have in Active Directory. But when this happens, it goes through a process of discarding what's called the RID pool, which is your relative ID pool. And by doing this, and again, I would spend a whole nother hour if I tried to give you in great detail how this happens. But when the RID has to do with creating unique SIDs, security identifiers, which is mandatory if you're going to have a good quality, secure, well-operated network. By discarding the RID pool, we avoid that problem. We also reset something called the invocation ID, which is basically when it comes to replication, the domain controller uses this invocation ID to express I'm the originator of a change. And it has to do with other domain controllers not trying to replicate a change back to you if you're the originator. So it resets that invocation ID so that you are no longer the originator of those changes because, well, a snapshot, you restored back to a snapshot, you don't know about those changes, and you want the other domain controllers to replicate those back to you. There's also a third bullet point I put there that I'm not even going to go into because it basically doesn't even have to do with this, or it does, but only when it comes to your flexible single master of operations or your FSMOs. And so in the name of time, we're going to move along. But I'm going to give you the short answer is it works. Okay, that's the short answer. Active Directory virtualization works. You can now virtualize your domain controllers, which is something that we desperately need to be able to do in today's world of virtualized networking. I had a diagram there that I was going to show you and go into a whole like 400 level, at least 400 level description, but we're running a little short on time as far as that goes. So let me move into simplified management. When it comes to simplified management, what did they do? Well, they did a lot of stuff. And I'm only going to mention 8 items here, but they did a lot of stuff. They now took this really cool thing that we had as of Windows Server 2008 called, and actually more specifically R2, called the recycle bin, or more specific, the Active Directory recycle bin. But here's the problem. There was no graphical user interface. It was a chore to set up the recycle bin and to use the recycle bin. Well, the short answer is they fixed it. They made a user interface. Yay! Dynamic access control, which you'll see I have a bunch of sub-points there that I wasn't going to go into anyway, other than just so that you can see them in case you've been hearing these terms. These are things that you can search about when you're trying to research this stuff. Dynamic access control is a whole new way of controlling access to resources on your network. And it will take some learning. Okay, I will tell you this is something that is going to take some, a whole new way of thinking of things. But if you do it, I think you're going to be very pleased. It's a much better way because we've been using the same level of access control with our SIDs and our access tokens the way they've been pretty much almost since the beginning. And so this is completely reinvented. Very cool. Active Directory based activation, which means now if you're using a Windows Server 2012 member server or a Windows 8 client, the only thing you have to do if you're set up, to use this feature, to activate those machines is join the domain. Can't get much simpler than that. Just join the domain. We have something now called the Active Directory Windows PowerShell History Viewer, which is very cool for those of you that want to learn PowerShell. For those of you that are thinking that PowerShell is some kind of weird programming language or some kind of command prompt way of doing things, which is kind of true, but not really. But if you're at all intimidated by PowerShell, here's something that's very cool. You can go through and see all the different things you've done through the GUI in Active Directory, and it will display for you the PowerShell commands that were actually taking place behind the scenes to make it all happen. Now, this is something that we already had in other Microsoft products, but now we have it with Active Directory, which means you now can write PowerShell scripts without having to learn PowerShell from scratch. You can just take things that you've already been doing and see what the scripts are that go along with it. And then obviously you tweak them a little bit and things like that, but it's a great way to learn PowerShell for Active Directory. Fine-grained password policy. Again, great feature added to Windows Server 2008 R2, but didn't have a user interface. Now it does. There are many Kerberos enhancements, specifically, Kerberos is all about security, so I'll say specific to security. They've now created something called Group Manage, or not grouped, but Group Manage, I can't even say that, Group Managed Service Accounts. So again, that's kind of getting deep into things as far as the details. But I can tell you that if you have tried to use managed service accounts, which were created in Windows Server 2008, and realized that the idea was great, but the actual use of it was not. Now it is, and I wish I could go into more detail, but again, go watch Dean talk about it. He explains it in detail, and it's really awesome. And then Active Directory replication and topology commandlets. Basically, instead of having to use all the other not so user-friendly utilities, we now have commandlets in PowerShell for dealing with Active Directory replication and topology. All right, now, before we go into certification, let me jump in and see if I can answer a few questions. And I'm going to tell you before I even try to answer any questions, I'm going to tell you that you have to please remember this is a product, meaning Windows Server 2012. It is a product that is just barely out of beta. It's just barely into release candidate, meaning it's new and it's still being worked on. And I'm not part of the team that does it. So I will do my best to try to get answers for you, but I may not be able to answer your questions. Feel free to ask them. I just wanted to give you the heads up. I only know so much. I can only learn so much so fast. Even with TechEd and learning all this stuff, it's all, going crazy in my brain right now. I don't know everything. So let's see here. Will the final release of Server 2012 install in place over the release preview, or will it have to be a clean install? You know what? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not Microsoft. I don't make that decision. I do know that is something that people have requested as far back as, well, the first server operating system. I know that Microsoft does their best to try to do it. I also know that if Microsoft doesn't do it natively, there's, if you go out there and research it, there are always people who have found a way, and they post articles on how to accomplish that. Is there an Active Directory upgrade path from Server 2003? That is a great question, Barry, and that is one of those where that's a simple question, and one of those where there's so much information in my brain right now. I'm trying to remember the specific upgrade paths, and I'm trying to remember. I think you can do it at least from Server 2003 R2. So I will have to. You know what I'm going to do, Barry, is I'm going to look into that, and I will get back to you on an answer on that. Can I go over fine-grained password policy? Yes. The real quick version of what that is, before fine-grained password policies, you had to actually create a different domain if you wanted to have a different set of rules regarding your password policies. With fine-grained password policies, we now can actually create separate rules for different users and groups and things like that without having to go to a new domain. Very, very cool. The only problem was, before Windows Server 2012, it was not easy to do. You had to go in and create these password setting objects, and then the whole thing was a big mess. I do have a lesson on it back in the materials that I've created on Windows Server 2008. But in Windows Server 2012, there's now a user interface. Can you say something about the new Active Directory specific features available with Windows Server 2012 FFL and DFL? Not very quickly, and not in great detail. So Jonas, great question. That falls perfectly into the area of I have a lot to learn. Okay, I have a lot that I still need to have details on. The good news is I will tell everybody, and I make it a business not to turn these webinars into sales pitch. I've been to way too many webinars that are all about sales pitch, but I am going to let you all know that I am currently working on our first Windows Server 2012 release here at Train Signal, and it's going to talk about new features in Windows Server 2012. And then from there, hopefully it will be at full release as far as RTM. It'll actually be an official product, at which point I will be going full force for the next year at least creating as much material as fast as I can and getting it out there and available to you guys. So again, I'm not here to try to sell you, but that's where a lot of that type of detail is going to come in, as well as we will do other webinars on certain topics. And as we see people looking for stuff like that, we'll do that. Let's see here. Will AD virtualization, let's see, will it be fully compatible with Hyper-V? Yes, that's exactly what I was referring to as far as AD virtualization. If you are using Hyper-V in Windows Server 2012, that's actually the only place that I'm aware of at the moment that it is fully compatible. As far as Citrix and VMware and Azure, not yet, but they've, that's up to them. They've all been notified of the need for the VM generation ID, which is the key component to make that work. Active Directory-based activation means we don't need to have a KMS environment. Does it mean it replaces KMS? The answer is yes, although I have been told that it will work in conjunction with KMS if you want to still have KMS. Okay, so yeah, that's the great news. You don't have to have KMS anymore. All right, I'm going to hit a few more of these. Let's see here. You should mention, let's see here, the Server 2012 Jumpstart free course just made available on demand. Okay, you know what? Jonas is pointing out that there is a Jumpstart free course that can be accessed. There's a really long URL that he has here. I don't know of a good way to make that available. It's too much for me to, I could try to copy paste it. No, actually I can't. I can't copy paste from this interface. But here's the short version. It's out on Born to Learn. And I would say just search for Server 2012 Jumpstart. So Jonas, thanks for sharing. That's always awesome when that stuff is out there. And I can tell you that Jumpstart is probably going to be related to, it's probably going to be somewhat related to the book that we talked about that we're giving away for free, which was a book that was also given away for free at TechEd. And that's the Introducing Windows Server 2012 book. Is there a PowerShell history viewer for Windows 7? That's very generic in the way of a question. There is PowerShell history viewer for other components like Exchange and things like that. Specifically for Windows 7, as an operating system, no, that's not something that I mean, unless I'm not understanding your question correctly, I don't really know how else to answer that, other than it does exist for other technologies in System Center, Exchange, things like that. But I don't know what you mean specifically for Windows 7. Will some useful utility, let's see, are there some useful utilities out there for maintaining the account in groups, such as identifying obsolete or unused groups or accounts? There's a lot of tools out there. And I tend, because of my role, I tend to have some pretty extreme Microsoft blinders on, so I apologize that I'm not quicker with giving you third-party utilities, but I do know they are out there for sure. I know that Quest has a whole lot of Active Directory tools that are great. They come highly rated by a lot of people. Aha, I see I'm getting into questions now about certification because I just had a question come through here. Of course, my screen just flipped out, so let me see if I can find it here on about the new MCSE certification. So I'm going to answer a few more questions, and then we'll get to that certification stuff because you guys said that you wanted it, and I'm looking at the clock, and it looks like I have about 5 minutes. So let me see what I can do here. I'm going to skip it as a question, and I'll go through it. Actually, it looks like all of my remaining questions right now at the moment are pretty much on that, other than one other about main file system enhancements, which again, that's more than a quick question there. There's a whole new feature set. All right, so I do see there's one other question here about managing server core. That's actually a great question that I want to address that I want everyone to hear. One really nice new feature in Windows Server 2012 is that because everything is designed with the new server manager to be remotely managed, there's a couple things I can tell you. Number one, you can remotely manage server core very easily. I mean, it's built in. It's just like an automatic. Number two, on server core, with PowerShell, you now have the ability to make it only semi-server core, meaning you can actually activate certain pieces of the GUI like the Server Manager, within a server core installation. All right, let me spend a few minutes here on the new certification because I know people are interested, and it's going to be fairly quick, and I'm going to actually throw another poll up at you that's going to help us out for a possible future webinar. But let me go through this real fast, and the very first thing I want to tell you, if you look at the screen right now where it talks about the new MCSE, and really that should say MCSE/SD. But anyway, at the very bottom, there is a link there. Here's the deal. You go to Microsoft.com/learning. That's what I always remember. Don't worry about remembering anything else. Just go to Microsoft.com/learning. And then click on a button that says certification. It takes you, actually technically that takes you to certification, and then on that screen you can click overview. And it gets you into the overview of all these new certifications. The one that was made public a few months ago was this MCSE Private Cloud. And there were more than just the one, but that was the one that all the buzz was about. And that's the one that you had to, start off being an MCSA on Windows Server 2008. And everyone got very confused because they said, you know what, I'm a server guy. So I am, MCSA Windows Server 2008. I got that because I inherited it by being an MCITP previously. But I don't know that I want to take these tests on System Center and what's this private cloud thing? Why don't you have something specific to Windows Server 2012? Well, as of TechEd a couple weeks ago, they made all this stuff public, that they now have an MCSE for server infrastructure. And they have an MCSE for desktop infrastructure. They also, on the SQL side of things, have an MCSE for data platform and business intelligence, or BI. On the MCSD side of things, for you developers, they have this MCSD called Windows Metro Style Apps, but there's two versions of it. It's called MCSD Windows Metro Style Apps using HTML5, and then there's one called Windows Metro Style Apps using C#. Okay. These are screenshots straight from Microsoft Learning's website. For MCSE Private Cloud, you have to be an MCSA on Windows Server 2008. And I want to emphasize, because this was a huge question that came up again and again and again, and it actually has come up even as recently as yesterday. I had someone ask me because the website is screwed up. Their website does not illustrate this picture of Windows Server 2008. It says you have to be an MCSA on Windows Server 2012. That is false. I know it sounds weird, but an MCSA on Windows Server 2012 will not take you to the private cloud certification. I believe it will sometime in the near future, but it currently will not. You have to be MCSA Windows Server 2008. And then there are two exams to take, the 247 and the 240. I don't know why they did that backwards, but anyway, the 246 and the 247 exams, which are pretty much based on System Center. There's also a note down here near the bottom that says until January 31st of 2013, exam 70-659 could be done in place of exam 247. That was on a previous version of the Virtual Machine Manager and System Center. And they're going to go ahead and grandfather people in who have done that. Now, to meet that prerequisite MCSA on Windows Server 2008, oh, there's my little arrow that just came up. Yay. Okay, here we go. To be an MCSA on Windows Server 2008, you have 3 exams. If you've worked towards MCITP on Windows Server 2008, you've done these exams. You've seen these numbers before, the 640, the 642, and the 646 exam. That's why if you are already an MCITP, they grandfathered you in. You got an email a couple months back, I know I did, that said, congratulations, you just achieved MCSA on Windows Server 2008. And you scratch your head and you said, huh? Well, that's why. Because that was step 1 going towards the MCSE private cloud. Now let's get to the stuff you want to know about. Server infrastructure. This is the closest thing to what the MCSE used to be in the past, or what the MCITP Enterprise Administrator is. You have to first be an MCSA on Windows Server 2012, which I will show you what exams those are in just a moment. Once you've done that, once you're an MCSA on Windows Server 2012, you then have a couple of planning and designing type exams, which will get you to MCSE. Now, here's the main thing that I want to point out, especially since we are low on time. Matter of fact, I'm sure I'm already over. Yeah, I see it's 1:01. So I'm going to go for just a few more minutes. I want to respect that you all have other places to be. Give me just another 2-3 minutes. I'm going to kind of wrap this up here. Is when it comes to an MCSE, it is, and this is very important. This is probably the most important thing that everyone needed to understand. It is not tied to a specific product. You'll notice MCSE just says server infrastructure. It's just like the very, very old days, back in the 90s when they first created this program. 20 years ago when they created the MCP program in the beginning, the original MCSE did not have an operating system tied to it. It was just an MCSE. And you had to stay up to date, meaning you had to renew your certification by retesting on newer products when they came out. The MCSA, however, and I'll go to the next slide so you can see the test that you have to take. Oh, I'm sorry, this is desktop infrastructure. I'm going to jump to MCSA. Here we go. MCSA, you'll notice, is actually called MCSA Windows Server 2012, meaning it is tied to a product. So what they did was they took kind of the best of both worlds. The stuff that they had back in the 90s with the original MCSE, then the stuff that they created with Windows Server with Windows 2000 Server, Windows Server 2003, where it is tied to an operating system. Okay, so the MCSA, you have an actual product it's tied to, and then from there you can get the higher level by just being a general solutions expert. And I will tell you, everyone has an opinion about this. And I have an opinion about this. And my opinion is, at least for the moment, and this opinion, trust me, I'll be the first one to tell you if this changes, because yeah, I'm an MCT, yeah, I work with Microsoft Learning, yeah, I'm supposed to promote their stuff and talk how it's so awesome, but I'll tell you what, if I think it sucks, I'm going to tell you. I was not a fan of the MCTS and the MCITP when they came out, and I was pretty public about it. Right now, I am super excited about what they've done with the MCSA and the MCSE. Yeah, it's a little bit confusing because it's new, and we're trying to get everything in place. And there's still some new stuff that you're going to see that's going to come out, which means it'll confuse it maybe a little bit more. But once we get past that confusion, this is certification the way it should be, in my opinion. That's just an opinion. You may disagree, and that's okay. Everyone has a right to their own opinion. But for now, I'm telling you, if you have given up on certification, maybe maybe you used to be part of it and then you gave up on it, come back, because I think it's really awesome. Not only that, but they've made the tests more difficult. And really, I don't want to use the word difficult because that just scares people away. They've made them more appropriate. That's the other problem they had with Windows Server 2008. And I don't mean to offend anybody if you took a test and failed it, but I will tell you that the tests were easier, and they weren't appropriate, meaning the people who were passing weren't necessarily experts, and the people who were passing, wait, did I say if they passed, they weren't necessarily, and certain people who were failing were actually experts. It didn't make sense. All right, because of time, I'm going to kind of wrap things up here in the sense that I have a bunch of slides, but they all just basically equate to the same thing. How you have to have an MCSA, and then from there you go up to an MCSE. And you can find all this stuff on Microsoft Learning's website. What I am going to do, so that people who need to get out of here can get out of here, is I will tell you that if you want to stay in touch, feel free to go ahead and come to my Facebook page. It's a great place to ask questions and hear about certain things that I may have upcoming as far as other webinars and stuff like that. You can follow me on Twitter. I don't do a lot on Twitter. I do more stuff on Facebook, but you can do both. You can also jump in to both Train Signal's blog and websites and Twitter and all that fun stuff, as well as Microsoft's Born to Learn and the Microsoft Learning website. Now, I need to throw a poll out there. I see people are starting to leave. Before you all leave, I'm going to throw a poll out here. And what I want to know is, based upon the fact that I had to do this very quickly, and it was not the original design for this webinar, would you like me to do another webinar? Because I can do one next month where I go in detail and actually spend the entire hour making sure that you fully understand the new MCSE and MCSD program. So at least for the 90 or so of you who are still here in the room, can you help me out here? Tell me if you'd like me to put that webinar together, because I'd be happy to do it, but only if you want it. So go ahead and jump simple yes or no, and then I'm going to send you on your way. So if you can do that for me, that'd be great, and in return, I'll take care of you. All right, I can tell you, without even closing this poll, that I'm getting a very overwhelming yes. Okay, so I mean, almost 3/4 of you have voted, and we're at about 80% of you saying, 4 out of 5 of you are saying yes. So for those of you who are saying yes, I'm going to do that for you. I'm going to have another webinar for you next month, and it's going to be specifically on these certifications in detail, because I had to rush through them here to get you guys out on time, or at least not very late today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to pass this back over to Joanna, who will wrap this up, tell you about the survey and the free giveaway and all that fun stuff, and we'll call it a day.
Thanks, Ed. That's all the time we have today, so thanks again for attending and for your participation. As a reminder, today's webinar was recorded and will be available at trainsignal.com/blog/webinars. We will also be emailing you the link. And remember, as you leave, please fill out the survey for a chance to win a copy of Introducing Windows Server 2012. We will be emailing the winner by the end of the week. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.